All right, welcome everyone. We are excited to continue our tour of national parks today. Today we have with us Ranger Caroline from Acadia National Park in Maine. So everyone wave and give a big welcome to Ranger Caroline. How are you doing today, Ranger Caroline?
I am doing well. Excited to be here with you all. Yeah, as you said, I am Ranger Caroline. I am in Acadia National Park in Maine, and I've sort of starred where that is on this map. A good deal a ways from where you all are. And we're going to talk about animal adaptations today, but I want to give you sort of a sense of where I am. So if we sort of zoom in on Maine a little bit. So I work with the National Park Service, right? And a lot of people have heard of national parks. I am in Acadia National Park, the first national park created east of the Mississippi River. But the National Park Service has lots of different sites, over 420 different sites. And so also in Maine, not national parks, but we have a national monument, Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument, the Appalachian National Scenic Trail, which runs to Georgia, and the St. Croix Island International Historic Site, which is pretty unique in that it's shared with Canada. So as you're thinking about sort of national parks, also be aware that there are other national sites, right? Seashores, monuments, and things like that. If we zoom in further on Acadia, though, right, thinking about the animals, this is where we are. So we're on the east coast of Maine, over 60 miles of rocky coastline. And those three big squares are the three large portions of land that Acadia protects. And anything in green there is in the park. So that big box in the middle is Mount Desert Island. That's where I am currently. That's where a lot of the park is. And you can see there is a road. So there's a bridge, so you can drive cars out here. To the right of that, Scudic Peninsula is the only part of the park that is on the mainland. But again, it's a peninsula, so surrounded by water on a lot of the sides. And then at the bottom of your screen, part of the island of Isla Ho is in the park. This doesn't have a bridge to it, so you need to take a boat to get there. And so Acadia is one of the top 10 most visited parks with just under 4 million visitors a year. Um, and so that's a little bit about where I am, and we're going to jump right into things. So today we're talking about animal adaptations. And you can think to yourself, do I have a definition of adaptation or maybe an example of an animal adaptation that I've learned about? And we're going to create sort of a working definition of an adaptation together. And so I like to think of an adaptation as a body part. So, right, our thumbs, or a behavior, something that is done. So, like climbing would be one. Um, so, a body part or a behavior that helps an animal to survive. And you can sort of flex your arm if you want. And I'll invite you to try that out with me. So, an adaptation is a body part or a behavior that helps an animal to survive. And so, thinking about that, an adaptation, something that helps it to survive, if you had to live in the deep forest for a couple of weeks, I want you to think about what are some of those things that you would need to survive, right? Because we're humans, we are also animals. So, some of these same survival needs we need as well. And those are what we're going to look at and say, how do different animals meet these needs? And so there are lots of them. We're going to focus on just a couple today. And we're going to come up with some hand motions as well to go along with those. So maybe you thought, it's getting towards lunchtime. I need food, right? So you can mimic eating some food. You can do this with me. So food is one of those survival needs. Along with food, we often think of water. So you can make a W and bring it up like you're drinking water. So food, water. Shelter or some sort of protection is also an important need. You can make sort of a roof over your head. And then defense. So, like you're shielding yourself from something. So, let's see if we remember those. You can act them out with me. Food. We've got water, like we're drinking water, shelter, and defense. So as we go along, I might describe or show you an adaptation, and I might say, hey, show me which survival need that helps them to meet. And you'll say, oh, that's a defense one. Oh, that helps provide shelter. Something like that. So how this is going to work is that I am going to share a little bit about three different animals that we have here in Acadia. We'll go over some of the adaptations that they have. Um, and and I will say the first two are also animals that you might see where you are. The last one is more in the Northeast. But today we're going to start talking about mammals. So, mammals are animals that have hair or fur. This is an adaptation that helps them provide warmth and protection for some mammals. And the mammal that we're going to be looking at specifically is the white-tailed deer. So perhaps you've seen these. These definitely are in Kansas. They live in forests, they live in fields, meadows. They like to bed down near sources of water like streams, lakes, marshes, swamps. And they are crepuscular, kind of a cool word if you want to say it with me now, crepuscular, which means that they move about, they forage, they're most active at dawn and at dusk, which means they've got really sharp night vision to be able to see. Maybe you're like white-tailed deer. So they're named for how they use their tail to communicate. So in this image here, you can see that the tail is up and the underside of it is white. So these deer will lift their tail. So a behavior, they'll lift their tail if they sense danger in order to communicate that danger and warn other deer. So what do you think this adaptation helps them with? Does it help them to get food, water, shelter, or defense? You can act it out now. Maybe you're like this. It's absolutely a defense adaptation, right? They're warning other people or other deer about danger. Deer are generally herbivores, so that means that they eat and they forage for plant matter and berries. But they're also prey animals, meaning that they get eaten, right? They are food for other predators. And the things that eat them, their predators include bobcats, mountain lions, coyotes, also humans. If we take a look at this image, I want you to look at their legs for a moment. So they've got really long, powerful legs, and these legs help them to run. They can run up to 40 miles an hour. And so maybe you think to yourself, what's the speed limit on the road near where I live or near where my school is, right? 40 miles an hour is pretty fast. They can also swim, which surprises some people. They can swim up to 13 miles an hour. They've got a super long stride when running, up to 25 feet, and they can jump as high as 10 feet, so way taller than I am. So think to yourself, how does this adaptation, right, a body part adaptation of long, powerful legs, help them to survive? And you can act it out. Is it food, water, shelter, defense? Knowing that they eat plants, it's defense, right? The ability to get away from their predators. Now, let's take a look at another body part adaptation. Look at those ears. And I want you to think to yourself, just looking at them, looking at the structure, do I think they have really good, okay, or not so good hearing? And if you said, yeah, they probably have really good hearing, you are correct. And we can try to mimic that ourselves by making our own sort of deer ears. So if you cup your hands and put them alongside your ears, just listen to what things sound like with that, and then take them away. And then put them back and take them away. And I'd encourage you to try this outside as well. So maybe you noticed here, right, by extending your ears, they have big ears. That helps to funnel in sound, especially predator sounds, right? And what they can do without turning their head, they can sort of rotate their ears to help localize sound. So another defense adaptation, right? So they can hear and know what's happening around them. Here's some other pictures of deer, and I want you to look at these pictures and think to yourself, do I think these are one, males, or two, females, and you can vote in your own classroom just by holding up one or two. Are they males or females? And think to yourself, how do I know? Or what is my reasoning behind that? And if you said one, if you said males, you are correct. So these are both bucks, which are male deer. And the key here is the antlers, right? The little things off their head. Antlers are branched bones that are shed and regrown in male deer every year. It's some of the fastest growing bone. In white-tailed deers, it can grow about a quarter inch per day, which is quite a bit. And that antler growth cycle sort of coincides with the breeding season. So males have hardened antlers for fighting other males, which helps them to establish dominance and breeding privileges. And so I'm going to show you here, I have a skull that I'm going to show you. And same thing, I want you to think, okay, do I think it's a male or do I think it's a female? And you can vote by holding that up. And here it comes. So here is our skull. I'll turn it a couple different ways for you here. What do you think? Is it male or female? And how do you know? You said it's probably female. You are right. This doesn't have any antlers. We don't see any place where those antlers might have been. And so when you look at skulls, while we have this here, skulls can tell us a lot about an animal. And if we look at this, I'm going to back up a little bit so you can see its nose. Take a look at this, and I want you to think to yourself, does it have a strong sense of smell or not? And I will tell you, look at the length of this. Deer have a really strong sense of smell. Um, they can sense the scent of a human in the underbrush even after a couple of days. This helps it to avoid that area. I also want you to look at the teeth here. We said that deer are herbivores, so they eat plants. And look at the structure of those teeth. Are they sharp? Are they pointed? They're kind of like your molars, right? They're flat. They're really well adapted for grinding up plant material. So we can use the skull to help us learn about it. So there's the bottom of its teeth. And I want you to take your tongue, run it along your teeth. What do you notice and what do you feel? And you might notice that your molars, right, are kind of flat and with ridges. So we use our back teeth as well to grind up our food. So that's a little bit about the white-tailed deer. Just sort of to recap, we talked about the strong sense of smell and hearing that they can use to detect predators. We talked about the antlers, how they use their white tail to communicate danger, those long, powerful legs, as well as the teeth that are well adapted to grind up plant matter. So that's a little bit about the white-tailed deer.
All right. So we have, thank you so much for about the white-tailed deer. And I did want to tell our friends in Kansas joining us that this is the deer that you often see in Kansas. And we apologize about the Q&A. We're trying to troubleshoot that. But we did have some questions come in last session. And so I wanted to address a few things. So number one, people always want to know, how long do white-tailed deer live?
Yeah, it's going to depend a little bit on the situation and each of them. But the lifespan in the wild is usually 3 to 6 years, and the does or the female deers tend to live about 1 or 2 years longer than the male deer.
Gotcha, gotcha. We also want to know, how big do they get?
Yeah, they can be quite sizable. So bucks, those male deer, can be up to 200 or 300 pounds. And they stand sort of just over or up to just over 3 feet tall at the shoulder.
All right, perfect. I think we are ready for our next animal, Ranger
Awesome.
Caroline.
So we're going to move on to another category. These three animals are different broad categories, and that's looking at birds. So birds are endothermic or warm-blooded, just like mammals. They've got feathers, they lay eggs, and most have hollow bones to make them lighter and easier to fly. And the specific bird that we're going to look at today is the northern flicker. And so we have that here. Their range does extend into Kansas. I'm not sure if you've seen one or not. They're a type of woodpecker. So similar to other woodpeckers that you have in your area, they will spend time in trees. But unlike other woodpeckers, these northern flickers often spend a good amount of time on the ground. But they also do have to exist in trees, and their feet are really well adapted to this. So again, a body part adaptation. Um, Woodpeckers have a special arrangement of their toes. So two are pointed forward and two are pointed backward. And this helps them to be able to move up and down the bark on trees. So I want you to hold your hands up if you're comfortable doing so, and pretend that your fingers are claws. Note that they all sort of curve in the same way, which if you've climbed trees, right, makes it easy to go up, but a little bit more challenging to have a good grip while you're going down. So that two forward and two back makes it a lot easier for woodpeckers to move in both directions. Additionally, in terms of like holding on to that tree, their tail is also really well adapted. So like you can see in this picture here, their tail can bend and spread to support the flicker on the tree. So notice here how sort of the feet and the tail almost form a tripod, helping to keep the bird more stable as it's pounding into the wood of a tree. What do they eat? Well, northern flickers generally eat insects. They really like ants and beetles that they gather from the ground, but they'll also eat fruits and seeds in the winter. But I said they really like ants. So flickers will go after ants underground, sort of hammering into the soil the way other woodpeckers will drill into wood. But if you think about how does this work, their beak is only so long. So they have an adaptation that helps them to sort of reach further into the ground to get their food. And you can think, what is this? How are they going to reach their food underground? They've got a really long tongue. So woodpecker tongues can be up to 1/3 their body length. Woodpecker tongues in general are long. The northern flicker has the longest tongue of the northeastern woodpeckers. So I want you to show me, how do you think this adaptation, the really long tongue, helps the northern flicker to survive? Food, water, shelter, defense. Yeah, it's food, right? And you can see here in this picture, right, you see the length in that bottom image. You can see how the tongue is really well adapted to the specific food source, to ants. Maybe you can see those barbs sticking out of the tongue. That helps them to catch and hold on to the ants. Now, here's what it looks like in real life. A northern flicker can stick their tongue out 2 inches beyond the tip of their beak. So if you're comfortable with it, you can stick your tongue out and see how long it goes. For humans, it's generally about an inch away from our mouth. We can stick our tongue out, which if you think in comparison, we're a lot taller, we're a lot bigger than these woodpeckers. Um, so that's interesting to think about. So I also want you to think, okay, if we had similar proportions with woodpeckers, how long do you think your tongue would be if you were a woodpecker? And you can sort of show with your hands how far out do you think you go? How big do you think your tongue would be if we had the same proportions as a woodpecker? And I will show you a little bit what that might look like. Again, if my proportions were the same as a woodpecker, here it comes. Here's my face and it's extending out. Doesn't even fit here. My tongue would be about 2.5 feet long if I had the same proportions as a woodpecker, which is pretty crazy to think about. And now many of you are probably like, wow, that's super cool. What does it do? And so here's how it stores its tongue. Its tongue essentially wraps around its brain. And I'm going to show you in a moment sort of a diagram of what that looks like. Because it is so long, there's sort of a space. It's not directly touching its brain, but there's a space in its skull where that tongue is able to go and sort of wrap around as a way to store it, essentially. But it also provides a little bit of cushion for the brain as that woodpecker is repeatedly pecking into either the ground or a tree. So that's a little bit about the northern flicker. To recap, we talked about adaptations, their toes, right, going in both directions, their tail to help them be stable on the tree, the tongue, both the length of it, and the barbs that are specifically adapted for their food source. Any questions there about the northern flicker?
Yes. So could you remind us how big they are, maybe compared to like a robin? That's like a common bird here in Kansas. So are they like a smaller bird, a medium-sized bird, or a big bird?
Yeah, so I mean, they're smaller than other woodpeckers, but compared to a robin, probably a little bit bigger, but on the similar size.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And I'm still amazed that this tongue goes around its brain. I just can't fully wrap my mind around that and how that would work. Um, yeah. So, nevertheless, um, so I'm still just, and then the tripod is a very, very cool adaptation. I know one question. Um, do all of them have the red colors, or do they kind of are they different versus if they're a male or a female is a question that we had last time that wasn't able to be answered.
Yeah, so like many birds, there is a slight difference between the male and the female.
All right, and is it true? I guess I'm just going to randomly ask a question. I've been told or maybe read that it's the male birds that sing. Is that accurate? Is that what you know or not? We may
Ooh,
have to Google that one.
I do not know that one for
Okay, we may have
sure.
to Google that one. Or that could be,
Yeah,
the riddle for the day or the Google search thing for the day. But
yeah,
that's,
everyone
I
look that up.
swear,
What do you think?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So interesting. Just a little food for thought. Um, that's kind of what I read before. Okay, so we have covered the deer. We have covered the northern flicker. What do you have next for us, Ranger
Yeah, we
Caroline?
have one more. We're going to look at amphibians. So
Sweet.
amphibians are ectothermic. They're cold-blooded. They spend, in general, time, some of them in water, some of them on land. But either way, they really need damp environments because they get their oxygen. They essentially breathe through their skin. And so today we're specifically going to look at the red-backed salamander. And this is something that you probably will not see near you. This is more localized to the northeast. Um, and the redback salamander, I said, right, amphibians could live on land or in water. This one lives on land and just on land. But what that means is their habitats need to be damp and to be moist in order that they can get that oxygen because they don't have lungs and breathe the same way that we do. So you'll often find them under logs, in leaf litter, burrowing in deciduous forests. In the cold months, they'll go under the frozen ground.
Wow.
And in Acadia, we've got 4 different species. So this is just one of them. We have a spotted salamander, which I think looks kind of cool, a northern two-line salamander, and an eastern newt as well.
All right. Now, so you
And
say they
so,
breathe through their skin. Is that right?
yep,
Okay,
essentially.
which yeah, again, which is crazy. Now, how big are these salamanders? So when we see these pictures here, like as far as we probably have some students working on measurement. How big would these be as far as inches or
Yeah,
feet?
that's a
Yeah.
great question. And these pictures would be a lot better if we write. It's always good to throw something in there for scale. They're generally about 2.5 to 5 inches in length.
Okay. All
Um,
right. So,
yeah,
kind of an adult hand or two would be more of a child's hand. Okay. All right, awesome. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you look at these salamanders, I want you to think, which one do I think is the red-backed salamander? You can take a moment and think about that. And I will
Hmm.
tell you, it was maybe a little bit of a trick question. So both of these are red-backed salamanders. The name doesn't always ring true. So redback salamanders have two color phases, a red back, which you can see on the top, and a lead back, which you can see on the bottom there. And so when I use the term phase, I don't mean that one changes into the other. They're really just two forms, two ways of looking of the same salamander. So again, that red back is characterized by that orange to red stripe down its tail and body. The lead back is that consistent gray to black color. And what I think is really interesting is that they have different behavioral adaptations, right? We talked about climbing before. They have different ways of reacting to a threat. And so the lead back, if there's a threat, something that looks like it might eat it, the lead back will scurry away and hide. But the redback will stay in place, not move, and expose its bright coloration. You can think to yourself, why do you think that is? Um, and it is because, right, that redback, that red bright coloration is used by a lot of different animals as a warning to predators that they are toxic to eat. The redback shows that. The leadback doesn't have that sort of warning color, so it will try to hide. And indeed, these salamanders are toxic to some of the creatures that might eat it. But the leadback doesn't have that bright warning color, so it will scurry away and try to hide instead. So
Now, are both
defense.
of these here? I do and am aware, thanks to the Netflix Color series, right? Do their predators see them different? And in that sense, would it appear different? You know, what are their predators first of all, I guess I would ask, and then are they able to see the different colors?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, it's probably going to depend on um, what it is, but things that will eat salamanders, birds, snakes, some other things will also eat them. So I think it depends a little bit. But I would say, based on the different behavior, I would say that, yeah, things can probably perceive that color. Otherwise, I wouldn't imagine that there would be that different behavioral adaptation. So yeah, things definitely pick up on that brighter color for sure. Uh, and so we talked a little bit about how they don't get eaten or how they try not to get eaten. What do they eat and how do they actually eat? We'll talk about tongues a little bit more. They eat a wide variety of small invertebrates, worms, snails, larvae, insects as well. And you can see in this picture their tongue sort of darts out, and they forage by sort of thrusting their tongue in and out in a really quick forward motion to capture their prey. And you can see there's a sticky pad at the tip of the tongue um, to help them grab their prey. And I want to show you, this is a slightly different type of salamander, but it works the same way. This is a really slow motion video of what that looks like as they thrust their tongue out. They can extend their tongue 80% of their body in about 15 milliseconds, so well under half a second. And so last adaptation that I want to talk about is that breathing. So everyone take a deep breath in and let it out. So we use our lungs to breathe. Salamanders don't have that. Oxygen is entering their body through their skin and through mucous membranes in the mouth and throat. And again, these surfaces have to remain moist in order for that absorption of oxygen to happen. And so they have an adaptation, sort of a body part adaptation, to help increase the amount of oxygen they can absorb. And that is through what are called costal grooves. So you can see that there are these folds on the side, and the costal grooves help increase the surface area so that there's more space on their body, right? 2.5 to 5 inches is pretty small. This means there's more space for that oxygen to be able to enter their body and their bloodstream. And we can do sort of a really short, do we have time for a short demonstration or should we wrap up?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. So if you hold your hand sort of out in front of you with your fingers all the way closed, right? And you sort of trace the outside of it, notice about how long that takes. And then if you sort of widen your fingers, right? My hand is the same size, but now trace the outside. Notice there's a lot more surface area essentially, right? And that's what the costal groove does for the salamander, the same sort of space, but increasing all of these places where oxygen could diffuse into, um, get into their system. So that's what the costal grooves help with for salamanders.
All right. So, very impressive. Three different adaptations. It's interesting how all of them are different. You may, if you're in the classroom, maybe whisper or tell someone your favorite adaptation that you learned about today. I'm gonna say Ranger Caroline. Mine is definitely the long tongue. That is very cool to me.
Yeah.
Okay, but before we go, and I know we're over on time, and again, sorry about those questions, but what is maybe your favorite animal that we talked about or your favorite animal in the park? We always want to know that about
Mm.
our rangers.
Yeah, I do. I do like the woodpecker and the long tongue. I think, ooh, it's a tie between we've got porcupines, and it's really fun to see them. They've got like a little waddle that they do, and they can climb trees, and I think they just kind of look fun and goofy. But I also like the barnacle, which not everyone, it lives sort of on rocks or things down by the water. And not everyone knows it's an animal. So look up a barnacle and look up a barnacle feeding. I think
Mm,
it looks pretty cool.
okay, I'm definitely interested on that. So, well, hey, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Maine, and we loved hearing and learning from you. So, we hope you have a great day. Everyone, wave bye.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, take care. Bye bye.